Electrocast.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Kroger Delivery makes it easy to do your holiday shopping in a jingle. There might be a lot on your to-do list, but thanks to Kroger Delivery, you can get everything you need delivered straight to your door at the same great prices you'd find in store. Our refrigerated trucks always ensure that your groceries arrive fresh. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order of $75 or more and get free delivery with a Boost membership. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now, this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you.
I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris and I'm here with my older brother.
Wesley.
Today, wait, was that your Bob Dylan
Wesley.
impression? Wow. Wow.
Wesley. The Claw.
Today, we're talking a movie from 2024, released on Christmas Day, A Complete Unknown.
Man, that's barely 2024, but circa 2020.
What does that mean?
A Complete Unknown has been in gestation with this cast, this crew, since 2020. They had all kinds of issues, COVID, obviously, and then the writer's strike. You know, between then and now, James Mangold made an Indiana Jones movie. Timmy Chalamet made 2 Dune movies, and they finally brought it together.
Timothee Chalamet, born 1995, so 29 years old. This started gestating when he was 25, give or take, and he's playing 19-year-old Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I guess that tracks in terms of movie ages.
You know why? Because that dude is a baby face.
He's not so much a baby face as he is a baby body. Like, did you notice how much younger he looked when he had his shirt off?
Was it like Leonardo DiCaprio, Titanic era?
Yes, when he gets wet and he's coming up the stairs.
He's got the sleeves hanging off of him, and it's like, man, he's got nothing under there. Little Jack couldn't haul anybody over the railing.
Or when Timmy Chalamet is like in bed, hunched over and naked with Joan Baez, you're like, oh yeah, he's kind of still a kid.
Let's just say that in the Joan Baez, Bob Dylan bedroom apartment scenes, at no time was I looking at Bob Dylan.
Is that commentary on Monica Barbaro? I was in awe of her performances, and even more so when I found out that she was actually singing.
And playing?
And playing. Both of them.
And Timmy Chalamet singing and playing. Neither of them had ever been singers or guitar players.
Bonkers. I was gripped by this movie, and I'm sure we'll come around to its flaws or shortcomings or whatever, but they as artists held my attention. To think that these aren't trained musicians, that neither of them pursued this as their original passion, just blows my mind because they're so talented.
Yeah, I have to admit, Timmy Chalamet didn't have me convinced. And Monica Barbaro has only been in like one thing. You have Elle Fanning, who's still like 14 years old or whatever. But then I saw it and I was convinced of many things. Namely, that this is the coming of Timmy Chalamet. This is the arrival.
Like Dune wasn't?
Nope. Wasn't Little Women, wasn't Lady Bird, wasn't Wonka, and didn't care about Dune. They seemed like hustles. What? Of portraying adulthood. Like, wait, Timmy Chalamet's a tough guy?
I think I literally said that Dune Part 2 was the arrival of Timmy Chalamet.
Yeah, I disagreed until this one, where he came in and so thoroughly embodied this character, I was blown away. Commitment-wise, acting, presence. And then I was further astonished to see him in an interview where sometimes, especially when he's with the other cast, he's very precise and eloquent, calm. And then other times he's full on Shia. Like he's like the new Shia who's hopefully
like crazy Shia?
not as crazy.
Like bag on his head, like tattooed Shia?
Like puffy jacket, laughing a lot, like punching people in the ribs, kind of like bro dude, like little bro frat kid. And to see people like that who are so kind of gangly and awkward really lock it down for their performances is always astonishing to me. Brian called Shia electric, and it's easy to say that Timothee Chalamet is electric as Bob Dylan.
Electric. Get it?
Oh, yeah.
It's important to know where we stand in terms of Timothee Chalamet fandom. Sounds like you've come around. I've been a fan since Don't Look Up. He had one of those scene-stealing moments like Philip Seymour Hoffman in Sydney, where he's just like a bro dude and you're like, wow, he's just so versatile. But it's also important, and you've already touched on this, for us to establish our Bob Dylan fandom. Like, I always associate you in this era with the Beatles, and you kind of came to the Beatles, I feel like, later in life. Is that true?
It is true, mostly because of Gary Garcia. Obviously, I knew the hits, but then diving into the extensive catalog, I really got hooked much later.
I did dive into Bob Dylan when I was having these epic work commutes, and it didn't stick. Bob Dylan, to me, was an idol of my idols. Like, he was an idol of Steve Jobs, who also dated Joan Baez. He was an idol of Adam Duritz, who also sang a song with his son, Jacob Dylan, with the Wallflowers. And that's kind of my extent of Bob Dylan fandomness.
Wait, you're saying it didn't stick when you saw Bob Dylan in concert?
Was that with you?
Yeah. Well, half of it was with me.
Was it Paul Simon?
Yeah. And the other half was not with me because you, in your Bob Dylan rebelliousness, hopped a rail, ran away from a security guard, and disappeared for the Paul Simon portion of that concert.
I didn't disappear. I just went to the front.
Right. I thought you were dead. I thought you had gotten rowdy and broken a beer bottle on someone, and they ejected you, and you were clinging to the chain link fence, like looking at, like, what if she tries to hitchhike home? What if she's dead? And that's what I remember of that performance. But the Bob Dylan part, we hung out together.
That's like saying the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band is going to inspire a riot. You think I went crazy at a Paul Simon concert?
You disappeared. You never you never came back. And hey, these were times of trouble. They were agitator troubadours who were evocative of the resistance movement for Jewish guys. I don't know.
So bringing it back to A Complete Unknown, it was news to me that he was a agitator and that there was a time where he was revolutionizing folk music, that he was controversial.
Wait, how do you know this?
From A Complete Unknown, of course.
Do you? Did that movie portray Bob Dylan as an agitator and the leader, cultural leader of a folk resistance movement?
Okay, so he was always kind of that, but I didn't realize he was divisive within his own folk community.
To be rebellious is to rebel, not just against one thing. You got to be uniformly and universally rebellious.
And he was uniformly and universally rebellious against stagnation, against people deciding who you're supposed to be, people telling you who you're supposed to be. The themes of A Complete Unknown, which I took to be embracing change and embracing who you are, embodying who you are, were really quite profound for me. I've been thinking about this movie a lot.
This was in the clubs, performing little songs, being kind of pissy about it. Love Triangle, Bob Dylan, where it was a little bit insular. And when you got the crowds, the scenes, it almost felt like that was a different movie. And maybe 4 years later, 5 years later, in the chronology of this film, he was a different person. But it very much seemed like there was a public Bob Dylan and a private Bob Dylan, and we were mostly rooted in the private. While there were the musical, it was like Inside Llewyn Davis or something intimate like the Coen brothers, where they're singing and the harmony is beautiful, and you're like, holy cow, these actors are singing and performing for us. And it wasn't wider to me. I didn't feel Bob Dylan's cultural impact as much. I didn't get the sense of his place in history, the drug use, his evolution. I didn't get the sense that he was like a hood ornament for the history train. He was just little Bob who had glasses and then didn't have glasses, and had Sylvie and then had Joan, or whatever. You know what I mean?
But this is the kind of discernment that needs to be applied to biopics.
Yeah.
Right, where you choose, in this case, a very specific time in an artist's life. You don't try and kind of cram it all in, especially in the world of Bob Dylan movies. I mean, how many Bob Dylan movies do we have out there? We have the Cate Blanchett one. We have the one where a whole bunch of people played Bob Dylan.
That was the Cate Blanchett one.
Oh, how does this fit into the body of Bob Dylan movies?
I think this one is the best and most memorable, if for no other reason that I didn't see those other ones. I didn't see, I'm not there. I didn't read the Bob Dylan biographies. The filmmakers talked about wanting to make this distinct and maybe, as you were suggesting, very specific to a more restricted time frame, time and place for a certain period of Bob's life, because there are so many. There's no shortage of Bob Dylan, as Timothee Chalamet pointed out, so many biographies that one of them that he recalls was called Not Another Bob Dylan Biography.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I appreciated it, but my knowledge of Bob Dylan is relatively limited. And this movie in terms of in-depth, because this dude, not effusive, not vibrant and colorful in interview appearances, he didn't transition into acting or anything. I imagine Bob Dylan in his 80s is exactly like Bob Dylan in his 20s, and in that way sort of impenetrable. So I took from this movie as much, maybe 80% of my Bob Dylan knowledge.
This movie comprises 80% of what you know about Bob Dylan?
Yes.
Well, let's hope it's factual.
And obviously I know his music, but in terms of his personal life, I know what Bob Dylan looks like, what he sounds like. And there were times when it was Timmy Chalamet on screen, and other times where he would put on the sunglasses and play the harmonica and play the guitar and sing. And it didn't have to be spot on, because someone said, if you're going to do Bob Dylan, you got to do it rough. If it's too perfect, it's not going to be, true to Bob's spirit or whatever. But he completely disappeared into the role.
Yeah, it sounds like you were mesmerized by the performances, that you got lost in the performances. Whereas, though I experienced some of that, I was really tracking this theme, really seeing how the filmmakers discern that the choices that they were making about the scenes and what they chose to portray really was in service of this idea of change and being who you are. That's what I was really tracking.
I didn't know a lot about Pete Seeger, and equally not much about Woody Guthrie. You know what one of Woody Guthrie's biggest hits was?
What?
He sang "This Land Is Your Land." I thought that was America the Beautiful and Purple Mountain's Majesty and Waving Fields of Grain and stuff.
That's not our national anthem?
No, but which it more or less is. You know what I mean? This land was made for you and me, and it's appreciating the beauty from coast to coast and presumably the people within. And Kelly Ray got all excited. You know that this is, in a way, a protest song. The verse is generally omitted, so much so that I had never heard it. One of the verses is, there was this big high wall there that tried to stop me. A sign was painted, said private property. But on the backside, it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me. And that's Woody Guthrie coming through in a very soft, folky song of resistance. I think these themes might have been more heavily reinforced by the electric guitar Bob was so insistent on picking up. But even his simplistic, one of them is bad, one of them is good. I think simplistic is the good one. Or no, simple is the good one, where he would just pick up his guitar and strum and sing songs that have lived in the minds and hearts of protesters and resistors and conscientious citizens for 6 decades, were his strummy stuff. And then he got more experimental and more funky, but it was the words, man. Bob Dylan being the only musician, who ever won a Nobel Prize in literature.
Yeah, that was news to me as revealed in the coda. Are you saying that Bob Dylan's message was that folk music is in the words and in the themes, and it doesn't matter how it's delivered, even if it's electrified? Or are you saying that Bob Dylan may have had other motivations for going electric? I think because he was embracing change and embracing the times and moving forward in his musical journey.
I do think his music was his manifesto. I think that's what people took from it. I think it's what he felt. So like Mom, he put it all on the surface, but inside was more of a mystery. So I'm sure that's what came across, that he was the voice of a generation of resistance, but not necessarily that he wanted to be, or that it was necessarily by design, in that he was placing great importance on words. It's just, it felt from A Complete Unknown that he was chasing what affected him profoundly. And it was Woody Guthrie in a bed, and it was Pete Seeger by his bedside, and they would hand him guitars and he would speak earnestly and honestly in a way that became a public persona, which was incongruous to his personal life and what he wanted to take from people. He didn't really want to be a leader. He wanted his music to connect with other people. Maybe he couldn't do personally or socially.
He couldn't contain the music within him. He had a voice, whether it was given to him or something that he cultivated. And he had this take on fandom that was really interesting to me when he said to Elle Fanning something to the effect of, it's not that they appreciate what I'm saying, it's that they wish they had said it. He was basically equating fandom with jealousy. It was such a window into the Bob Dylan character as portrayed by the filmmakers that was telling. It was a weird, if not unique, take on fame.
Man, much like Bob Dylan himself. Such an unusual delivery. These weird clipped vowels, maybe, I guess. There's no vibrato in Bob's voice. He doesn't draw anything out. He doesn't really stick those notes and makes them soar. He cuts them off, and you get the words or you don't. He is strange and unique and a little bit awkward. So what I came up with is Bob Dylan is the Mitch Hedberg of folk singers. Fame is hard for him. He hides behind the glasses. Mitch did that too. He would just come in and be abrupt and have these little one-liners and get out of there. Bob was there, and he was going to be cryptic in real life and in his words a lot of the time, and other times widely regarded as super profound.
Mitch Hedberg. What's his line? Yeah.
Yeah, and Mitch Hedberg embraced the train wreck that were some of his sets, which is what I appreciated. I don't know if Bob was in comedy or had bombed or been booed. I wonder what that would have done to him.
Well, he was booed, and he did bomb. They were literally throwing bottles and trash at him at the Newport Folk Festival.
But by then, he was Bob Dylan, the animal with the black jacket and the sunglasses and the hair and the cigarette and stuff. But that brings me back to A Complete Unknown, the smallness of this scale. Now, it didn't feel fake or it didn't feel cheap, but the stakes were, let me get this right. This movie, A Complete Unknown, originally, the working title was Going Electric. And there was a Bob Dylan Goes Electric book about this phenomenon at Newport. Those were the stakes of this movie. Do I have that right? Whether or not he plays what the people want, or whether he plays what he wants to play, which is at that time electric guitar.
Pretty much.
Is that okay? Is that enough?
Is that enough to justify this movie? Is
that enough to be like Bob Dylan? He's like, I want to play what I want to play at Newport. And people are like, green light, let's go.
It's an historical, as they say in the logline on IMDb, groundbreaking concert. I mean, this actually happened.
Yeah.
But it's not about the Newport Folk Festival. It's about Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's enough.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
Burlington's Oh Wow Winter Clearance event is on right now. Throughout your store, you'll find tons of new markdowns just taken. Look for red clearance tags throughout the entire store for her, him, the kids, and your home. Score some serious savings at Burlington, up to 70% off other retailers' prices on clearance items. These deals on top of deals won't last long, so stop in today. Burlington. Deals, brands, wow. Prices and selections vary by location.
Timothee Chalamet, James Mangold, Edward Norton, Boyd Holbrook, who stole his scene in A Complete Unknown. That's what makes this possible, and that's what justifies A Complete Unknown.
Boyd Holbrook, he is a James Mangold staple. Boyd Holbrook, it's kind of like having Finn Wolfhard in your Jason Reitman movie. It's probably just going to happen. And then at the end, I was like, whoa, Johnny Cash was Boyd Holbrook? That was
he
wild.
he was all stomping around and clucking and clicking and being drunk and amazing.
And thank God he's a country boy and he can inhabit that role. And I don't know that he looked a tremendous amount like Johnny Cash any more than I think Timothee Chalamet was a dead ringer for Bob Dylan. Didn't matter. He completely embodied that role as Timmy Chalamet did his.
Yeah, and I have no reference for Pete Seeger, but boy, did Edward Norton seem like he was immersed in that role. When he's crying and smiling in the wings at the folk festival, I'm like, yeah.
Man. No Fight Club was that Ed Norton, huh? But someone asked him, what did you do to transform into Pete Seeger? And boy, did that dude deflect that question.
Really?
He didn't want to go into the weirdness of the hairline and the face. He bears a passing resemblance to Pete Seeger, but refused to divulge. It was all about the character embodying the spirit of a person who happens to be a real person and all that. But he wasn't going to get into like, oh, we put the makeup on and then I just felt different. It was really much more about the performance. Likewise, playing the frickin' banjo, Ed Norton, and singing.
So good. The banjo was just an extension of Ed Norton in this. It was crazy. Was he a father figure to Bob Dylan?
Oh, sure. Bob didn't seem to have a past, and he was elusive about what his past was, even to Sylvie, and really just kind of adopted this. Bob Dylan arriving in New York is who Bob Dylan is. And everyone's like, Zimmerman, and he's like, shut up. And kind of doesn't matter. And so I think that Pete was absolutely the father figure that he may or may not have ever had.
And so his act of rebellion at the folk festival was in direct defiance to basically like his dad?
No, I think it was him, and it was directly against the perception and the suggested responsibilities he had towards his fans and what all the record promoters in the suits deemed was folk. And you got to give them their thing or they're going to be mad at you. And some of them were mad at him and they did throw stuff. Have you ever been to a concert that was off-brand where people didn't hear all the songs that they came expecting to sing?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Artists do that all the time. They don't want to play the hits. They want to play the new stuff.
I've been through so many of them. Have people ever booed?
Not that I've seen, but they have relentlessly, like hecklingly requested the hits over and over again.
Yeah. So what was it, the thing that said that bikers look like the meanest people in the world and are actually the nicest? And hipsters or whatever look like the nicest people but are actually the meanest? And I don't know that the folkies at Newport, did they come with tomatoes and banana peels? Were they all pissy and angry and lashing out? Because I've been to multiple concerts where the people might have been disappointed and maybe bewildered, but not angry necessarily. So Nirvana goes on, they're like, we want you to do Unplugged. And they're like, okay. So they made it almost like a funeral with white flowers all over the place and sweaters and candles and stuff. Brought the Meat Puppets on, did David Bowie covers, and everyone was like, no Teen Spirit, what the hell, And now people are grateful to have Nirvana Unplugged, which was completely different. And I'm not really sure about Newport. Like, this is a legendary thing, like you said, really happened. But are people so pissed that he didn't play Blowing in the Wind? I mean, that was his rebellion and his activism or whatever, but I didn't think it was such a big deal. He wasn't beleaguered, and he also didn't I think Elvis did some of the drugs, spoiler, in Elvis, but we didn't get into that. Bob was sad and disappointed, maybe drunk, and hiding behind his sunglasses, but we didn't get into the torture that he put himself through, his rampant drug use. Also a hero to the Beatles. George admitted less than a hero, but definitely an influence and someone that they looked to, but also was the person who introduced the entire band of the Beatles to pot and was all about pot. We never really got that.
I mean, he smoked like a chimney, but I never thought they were joints.
Yeah, Bob Dylan was big on drugs, as I understand it. Mr. Tambourine Man, if that Michelle Pfeiffer movie taught me anything, was about his drug dealer. In the Jingle Jangle Morning, I'll Come Following You, when he's desperate for a hit or whatever. Didn't get that. How many times did you brace yourself when Pete was like, hey, be careful on that thing, and he'd go roaring around on his motorcycle like Austin Butler. How many times were you worried he was going to wreck?
To be honest, I wasn't. He did do that stunt in the intersection, and Brian was like, why did that look so fake? And I think it was because of the stunt double. But no, that would have come out of left field for a complete unknown that I was watching.
And yet, a year later, he did get in a wreck. It's shrouded in mystery. From he was near death to he had some scratches and really inflated it up that he used it as an excuse to kind of escape the rat race. But it changed the course of his life. It changed his music. Subsequent 3 albums were much more country tinged and were about family. And then he came back to form. But that would have been a shift, a pivotal moment in Bob Dylan's life, and not this Coen Brothers-esque sort of toiling underground to make a name and then resisting that fame when it came. For me, it's personified in the sunglasses, but you can see him turn inwards under all the pressures and the expectations of the fame, right? He's like, everything he says in public is either an affectation or exhibiting this weird calloused exterior. And you're like, Bob Dylan is impenetrable. And I couldn't tell the difference in those times between Timmy and Bobby. And then he got rocked by some bar idiot. And then he's like back in the bedroom with a shiner.
He always returns to Sylvie in those times of vulnerability. And can we just close out this episode talking about Elle Fanning?
Let's do it. 14 years old, maybe 17 at the time of this movie, right?
1998. She was born in 1998.
26.
And portrays a woman who knows what she wants and who she is, although she has moments of weakness for Bob Dylan. I'm assuming that he was the love of her life, but was it the other way around?
She was his first love, young love, but in terms of like figuring out who she was or her place in his, she's not even real. Suze was the person. Suze something.
Susie was Suze or Susie. She was on the album cover. That
was the freewheeling Bob Dylan. Iconic, and thus she is mysterious. But he, as we saw in the movie, he kind of pulls her into that shot where it's about Bob Dylan, and he wants her on the cover with him and immortalizes her.
So she goes to the Newport Folk Festival a number of times. At least 2 specific times she cries. Why?
She saw the Bob Dylan that everybody else saw, I think, that wasn't her Bob Dylan. And further compounded later by the Bob Dylan that was definitely not her Bob Dylan when he is so close with Joan on stage. And that was the breaking point. Now, of course, by that point, their breaking point had already broken. They were broken up. So I was like, what? Like, where does Sylvie draw the right to be jealous? It was a weird time, I thought, in the movie for her to be crying and running away. To me, that was really tinged. And I don't want to take it too far away from Elle Fanning, but didn't it feel... So James Mangold also did Walk the Line. And Johnny Cash and his wife, June Carter Cash, met through performing, I think, but he was married and with a child. But that movie made it so clear that Johnny Cash found his person in June Carter that it was like, obviously, they're meant to be together. So much so that the scenes between Bob and Joan, I was like, what is he doing with Sylvie when this is so apparent? And maybe it was just the direction of the filmmaker. But didn't you feel like they were the thing? And Sylvie, it's like, what are you doing? Get out of here, kid.
Nah. To the filmmaker's credit, Sylvie has her own journey in this film, which is entirely about Bob Dylan. And she also embodies this theme. I keep coming back to it. It sounds like we were reading similar things into her tears at the multiple festivals. Brian called this the movie of longing looks.
Yeah.
And Elle Fanning's Sylvie character is like the queen of them in A Complete Unknown. But during the first one, I could see that she felt like she was losing the Bob Dylan she knew to the Bob Dylan that he was to become or that people wanted him to be. And he was kind of a dick when he rolls up and is like, come with me. And I was a little bit pissed that she decided to drop everything and go with him. But it was important because at that performance, she realized, all right, I tried, but I can't keep up with him. And I don't want to keep up with him. And he's unique in the way that he embraces change in a way that's really uncomfortable for the majority, if not like all people. And she realized that he wasn't for her. And in her own way, kind of ironically embraced her own change by walking away. I really liked it.
Oh, she did. She walked away for sure. And while she is not Joan Baez and Sylvie is not Sylvie, but Suze, who we don't know a tremendous amount about, she understood and wasn't fawning over the Bob Dylan that she knew was mourning his loss or seeming disappearance. But she did. She got up and walked away. She didn't cause a scene. It wasn't stay the hell away from my man, you bitch. And then she came back. It wasn't like I can't bear to look upon you as I walk toward the boat or whatever. She came back to the fence and looked him straight in the eye and was like, this isn't who I can be. And then left. And left him clinging to the fence, looking after her, and took off and on her terms, which is super admirable. I mean, he's Bob Dylan, and she was just like, this isn't good for me, and peaced out.
He's Bob Dylan, but my big takeaway from A Complete Unknown is that Bob Dylan was a human, and I appreciated that about this film. I appreciated the deftness with which they handled his humanity and his larger-than-life persona. A definite good. For me,
yeah, definitely good.
For A Complete Unknown.
Is it all right? Is it all right, or is it totally? There were definitely totally aspects. Maybe this is a fortuitous totally. Maybe they're lucky that they had the circumstances they did. That Timothee Chalamet and Monica Barbaro had 5 years to learn how to play and sing, and then play and sing together while acting and becoming completely immersed in these roles. Really, really good things about this movie, and far outweighed any little quibbling qualms that I have.
I think you should commit. I think this should be a complete totally.
Sure.
A complete totally from Wes and a complete good from Iris, and that's our discussion on A Complete Unknown. Were you amped up? Get it? By this film? Amped up?
Oh, amped up. Electric.
Let us know, 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com, and 350 plus additional episodes. You know, we started this before the pandemic, or whatevermovies.com, or wherever you get podcasts, wherever you're listening to this right now. And by the way, thank you for listening, and Happy New Year.
Hi, I'm Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks. What did you do on your last Saturday night?
Did you hear something?
Toilet paper.
There's none. Nada. The reserves have gone dry. People are hoarding it. I should have done that.
They're all out of hand sanitizer at my Target.
Mark, when did you last watch the news?
We are getting reports of forced quarantines in China, Japan, and now Italy.
You're cutting onions in half and putting them around your apartment.
Yes, exactly. It kills the COVID.
Excuse me?
Let's go. Let's go. Get in.
Vamos, rápido.
Have you ever driven one of these? Never.
I'll drive, ladies.
I've got the keys.
Excuse me, I'm lost. I'm looking for my wife. I got turned around.
Join me, Eric Roberts, Jennifer Elise Cox, and Ed Asner for The Last Saturday Night, an Electrocast podcast. You'll love it. Electrocast.
Dreaming of the perfect event or longing for a clutter-free space? I'm Stephanie with I'm with Steph, where your vision becomes a reality. From magical weddings to transformative home organizing, we bring you expertise and passion to every project. Whether you're planning a grand celebration or seeking peace through organization, we tailor our services to meet your unique needs. I'm with Steph. To explore our services and connect with me directly, visit I'mWithSteph.com. Mention Electrocast for a 20% discount.